So we're going to get started. Oops. All right, great. Welcome everyone to tonight's 43rd Ward Aldermanic debate. We appreciate those of you in the audience, as well as I know we've got several hundred people on Zoom. So thank you for coming out or tuning in tonight. My name is Melissa Masick. I'm the president of Mid-North Association. Tonight's debate is co-hosted by a number of the 43rd Ward Neighborhood Associations. I'm going to read them off quickly, and if you're part of those neighborhood associations, please feel free to raise your hand. The neighborhood associations that are running tonight include Park West Community Association, Wrightwood Neighbors Association, Sheffield Neighbors Association, Gold Coast Neighbors Association, Ranch Triangle Community Conservation Association, Lincoln Central Association, as well as Mid-North Association. We want to thank both of the candidates for coming tonight and spending some time with us. We also want to thank Principal Steinmiller and the Lincoln Park High School team for letting us use their auditorium again. Before I introduce the moderator and we get started, just one quick audience rule that we want to quickly go over. Please respect the candidates as well as the moderator. And that means, please don't make any noise or interrupt the candidates. And please hold all applause to the end, or else we could be here for hours and hours this evening. So there'll be plenty of time to applaud at the end. And I thank you for following those rules. You will also probably see there will be a yellow card that goes up when there's 30 seconds left, and there'll be a red card that goes up when the time is over for the question. Okay. All right. Well, with no further ado, tonight we are very fortunate to have Mary Ann Ahern here as our moderator. Ms. Ahern, no doubt, is probably the most familiar face in the room here tonight. She has been covering the local and national politics for NBC5 since 2006. She has received several Emmy Awards for her news reporting, plus the prestigious Peter Lisagor, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Lifetime Achievement Award from the Chicago Headline Club. Ms. Ahern has also received recognition for her insightful coverage of the Catholic Church, reporting from Rome on the selection of Pope Francis, as well as the canonizations of Pontiffs John XXIII and John Paul II. In 1991, she was the first reporter to expose the priest sex abuse crisis that led to the Chicago Archdiocese eventually opening the files and creating a lay review board, which is a model that a number of other cities also followed. Finally, again, we are very honored to have her tonight, and with no further ado, I welcome Mary Ann Ahern.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I have a bad hip, so I might be sitting down for just a moment, but at times, don't think I'm, I just need a new hip after this whole election stuff is over. So that's what's going on with me. But thank you. I appreciate it very much. There will be a couple of ground rules. You will have a minute, 30 seconds. I think that is plenty to answer each question. If there is a need for a rebuttal, and I'll decide as the moderator whether there is a need for a rebuttal, and that will be 30 seconds if there is one. We don't believe there's any need for an opening statement, so we're going to get started right away because we got a lot of good people here, as well as those watching, including June Rosner, who got me here tonight. So you all who know June, yay to June. I could never tell June Rosner no, so obviously you knew who to ask to get me here. I've known her for years. So there is so much at stake. Big election 2 weeks from tomorrow. So to both of you, thanks for being here. But let's start the questions with crime. Within the last 2 weeks, the Chicago Police Department responded to a call at Cleveland and Lincoln Avenues. An officer had gotten into a struggle and the suspect disarmed that officer and fired a shot. However, no one was struck. You've had different reactions to that incident. What is the best way to communicate with residents about what happened that night? Mr. Comer.
Sure. So that evening, I was downtown at an event with family, and I had heard that there was an officer involved gun incident in the 43rd Ward. So I grabbed my jacket and left and came to the scene because that's a street that I used to play on as a kid because my best friends were there. When I arrived, the officials on scene knew this. There was an assailant who fought with an officer. The officer's gun went off, and that officer was sent to the hospital. So we wanted to update the neighborhood on an event like that. We said that we would further update the neighborhood once more information was available. We waited several days to make sure all the information was made available to the public. And we then filmed another video. We were very thankful that that officer is now recovering and wasn't shot, but that doesn't change the fact that that officer came to that was as close to life and death situation as possible. And as alderman, I'm always going to be on scene to make sure that the police department knows that they have the backing of the Aldermanic office and Brian Comer.
Mr. Knudsen.
Yeah, everyone can hear me okay? That was a night that put fear into a lot of 43rd Ward residents. I was at an event supporting one of our elementary schools, Lincoln Elementary, and a few of us left when we heard what happened. I went to the crime scene and spoke with our commanders, our officers. They thanked us for the response that the ward had given. And I talked to them about meeting the next morning to talk about getting the word out. A reality here is that my opponent filmed a video with his campaign button on, talking about his crime plan in front of a crime scene. But more importantly than that, he said that an officer had been shot and was in stable condition. We announced the next day that was not true. I did a lot of damage control with CPD to make sure that the community knew that that was not true. As of today, I still don't believe that video was taken down. It caused a lot of confusion in the community that I had to clean up on. I'm a steady leader, I'm a pragmatic leader, and I think this example is one that really shows judgment and how we intend to lead the ward.
Mr. Comer, react.
Certainly, I did not see my opponent at the scene, and I spoke with the police officers. I've been a beat facilitator for the 18th district. My relationship with the 18th district spans years before September, and that's when my opponent started talking with the commanders. I go back to Paul Bauer, Dan O'Shea, Jill Stevens. This is a real issue. And I just find it so disingenuous that the appointed alderman spent time this week making creative videos about an elected neighborhood leader, because I am the only elected neighborhood leader here.
All right, we had 30 seconds for the rebuttal.
And I would say, quite frankly, you didn't see me there because I wasn't filming myself. I was talking to the officers about how to talk to the community and make sure that fears were subsided.
You weren't there at all. You weren't there at all.
That is absolutely false, and you can talk to officers, Brian.
I was just on the phone with the 18th district this afternoon.
Okay, well, that is a blatant lie. I was there, and right afterwards, I walked to my friend's house, State Representative Margaret Crow, who lives a block away. I was there. I also saw people who I had seen at the Friends of Lincoln Elementary event right after. So again, this misinformation just shows a lack of judgment and a lack of stable leadership.
Let's follow up with, let's start with you, Mr. Knudsen. Do you feel safe in the 43rd Ward? Residents say they barely see cops on the street. And how can you make sure that police are more visible?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. So since I was appointed back in September, we've gotten right to work on crime. We've added more funding to fund our cameras in our ward that the police, the commanders feel is a good way to deter crime and put eyes on the beat. I've also co-sponsored 3 safety ordinances, one cracking down on illegal guns, one for attacks against first responders, and one for CTA safety. Going forward and talking to neighbors, I know what we want in the 43rd Ward is to feel safer through community policing. There is a desire to have officers on our beat. We have a reality here where we're right between the 18th and 19th, and officers often get pulled from where the 43rd Ward is. And going into a time right now where the city councilor will have a big piece of input as to who the next superintendent is, we need to be advocating for community policing. Neighbors want to know the police officers that are on their beats. They want those officers to know, which homes are under construction and vacant, which we see leads to crime at times. And they also want a friendly relationship with that person. I believe in community policing, and we will be fighting for it.
Could you answer the first part? Do you feel safe?
I feel safe in the 43rd Ward, but I don't feel as safe as we should.
Mr. Comer, take that question, please.
Certainly, I feel safe, but I know that people don't. Public safety is issue 1, 2, and 3 right now. And my actionable plans for public safety is the reason that Chicago Tribune endorsed me as the best candidate for this job and not my opponent. Up until tonight, all we've heard is that, the appointed alderman wants to install cameras. Well, cameras are great, but that doesn't actually rebuild the 2,000 officer deficit that we have in the city right now. That means that 80 officers right now in the 18th district and the 19th district are not on the streets. That's an acute problem that needs an innovative solution. I've already shared publicly time and time again my plan to create a pilot program with assets right here in the 43rd Ward, DePaul University. Recruit these wonderful college graduates the same way that law firms and accounting firms recruit those graduates. Say, serve for 4 years. At the end of that 4th year, you'll get a bonus payment commensurate to 1 year's worth of college tuition. So I used to be a development officer at DePaul. 80% of those students are on financial aid. If you are in your mid-20s carrying that much debt, you can erase a quarter of it. That's a big carrot. But again, we need innovative solutions. It's not just cameras.
One more question on crime before we move off. With summer approaching, what is your plan for North Avenue Beach to combat the problems that residents have seen before, including crowds spilling into the neighborhood? Start with Mr. Comer.
Sure. Actually, the first call I would make after being placed in office on May 15th is to Commander Ahern to discuss what we're going to do on day 1, May 16th, about North Avenue Beach. We cannot continue to have summers like that. We need to actually go and get more beat officers because it all gets back to rebuilding that police force. But in the meantime, North Avenue Beach is a center point for the entire city during the summer months. And we cannot keep offering a public community space like that and not protect it.
Mr. Knudsen?
Immediately upon entering office as alderman, I asked the police officers and commanders to have more foot patrol and Segway patrol around Lincoln Park zoo lights. There's a lot of population that comes in for zoo lights. We're having the exact same discussions right now around the beach and the amount of people that the beach brings in during the summer. I really like foot patrol on the beach, and I really like the Segways. It's good for officers in these situations to get out of their cars, and we're having these conversations to making sure that it happens quickly.
All right, let's talk about financial management. You both have talked about improving safety, not to mention there will be other services, no doubt, and we'll get to infrastructure in a moment. But how are you planning to pay for that, Mr. Knudsen?
Yeah, looking at the budget, my first month as alderman was spent in budget season. It was eye-opening for me. I'm a corporate attorney by trade. I've worked with a lot of startups on their budgets. In the city, we meet once a year to set each department's large budgets. We need more oversight throughout the year to see that they are meeting metrics throughout the year. There are a lot of departments with funded vacancies that cost the city a lot of money. A lot of these funded vacancies, meaning jobs that we budgeted for but may not be filled, are not ever filled. I feel that there needs to be real-time budgeting that is reviewed quarterly. And in the same way that we need real-time bus schedules for the CTA. Things need to be done more consistently. It cannot just be once a year.
Mr. Comer, on financial management.
Sure. We're going to have a 40% turnover in the Voice of City Council. That's historic. Gone are the days of hiding matters from the public. I'd love to be able to open those books immediately and start looking at the inefficiencies that exist in our city. We all know that they're there. We can't keep going down this route. We really need to look at how you actually improve city without diminishing services. And right now, our city council isn't doing that, and my opponent's part of that.
Would you like to respond?
I would.
30
So
seconds.
the first budget I was a part of was a balanced budget that increased funding for violence prevention by $100 million. It increased CPD staff recruiting by $20 million. It did all of this without a property tax increase. We need people on city council that view these budgets with pragmatic minds and are going to negotiate along the way. I bring that private sector experience to the table, and I look forward to doing it in the next budgets to come.
Yet
Well-
many people don't believe you went far enough on mental health nor public safety matters.
And then when you say that, that of course is going to cost more. Do you have a plan for that?
Well, again, we can build, my plan to erase the deficit in the police department. Obviously, we can get rid of some, inefficiencies in the city government, but you can also build public-private partnerships to help pay for that. Why wouldn't universities and other private organizations be interested in making their streets safer?
All right, let's talk about property taxes. You did allude to those. Mr. Comer, what about those? You wouldn't be the only voice. Obviously, you're part of the city council, but can you offer a plan to stabilize property taxes in your ward?
Well, I certainly wouldn't tie it to the consumer price index because that went up 9 points this year. And I think it's disingenuous of my opponent and the lame duck mayor to have not to have tied it to that, say, oh, there's a 5% guardrail, but then actually in an election year not raise property taxes. Those are nest eggs that all of you as property owners have. 9 points. What if it happens again next year?
What is your plan to stabilize them?
Well, we have to be honest with the public. We have to open the books, be transparent, and come up with a fiscally responsible plan. One of the things we can do to stop this low-hanging fruit of property tax increase is look at the small business development on our corridors. The 43rd Ward has amazing corridors, Clark Street, Halsted, Armitage. They need to be rebuilt. You build up those businesses by building up infrastructure. You put those small businesses, which are the cornerstone of those pathways, on a reduced fee schedule so they don't fail in the first 3 years. Now you have businesses that are actually producing real revenue streams. So you're talking about tens of millions of dollars in the 43rd Ward. You expand that throughout the city, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. So we can stop having this low-hanging fruit conversation about property tax increases.
Mr. Knudsen, about property taxes.
Yeah, I want to note again on this year's budget that there was no property tax increase. We also made a large advance payment on our city's pension deficit with the actuarial schedule. I've also been pretty vocal in pushing back against the use of a real estate transfer tax increase. I understand that when we fund programs, there needs to be diversified revenue sources. When we look at fiscal stability in the city, I'm looking at the funded vacancies that we're talking about, trimming some of this fat from the budget that exists. Also, supporting our business community, which I come from and produces a lot of the revenue that drives this city.
All right, so many of the organizers did give me a lot of good information, and development, zoning, preservation, all key issues in this ward. Let's talk specifically though about the rare orange rated building, fire era home on Burling. 3,000 community members, several community organizations, and Preservation Chicago all fought the demolition. Are you satisfied with what happened? Mr. Knudsen.
I'm very sad to see this house go. From a preservation standpoint, and it went all the way through the process and was not able to meet criteria as an individual landmark status, but also as an affordability, it's a loss of units in the ward. We're not an affordable ward. We need units. Although this home did not meet the criteria for preservation, I'm someone who chooses to live in a historic preservation district. I live in the Old Town Triangle in a building dated to 1875. It's part of the charm that makes our community what it is. It's sad to see this house go.
Mr. Comer.
Well, that's interesting to hear from my opponent because, with orange rated buildings, and for those that don't know, when there's a demolition permit placed towards an orange rated building, that immediately initiates a 90-day hold. And that 90-day hold is so that the property owner and the community can have a conversation. The role of alderman is to be the advocate for the community. My opponent didn't say one word to the community. He's not engaging with the residents. He's not listening. I signed that petition back in December. Timmy said nothing. Said nothing until a few days beforehand, saying that he had approached the real estate magnate to see if he would change his mind. That's not how an alderman should be treating the residents of his community. I would have reached out immediately and brought the property owner and the community, the concerned community members together to have a conversation about what we can actually do. We have so many wonderful historic preservation districts in the 43rd Ward. We need to protect those. And he didn't. He neglected his job.
30-second rebuttal.
So that's not honest to the process of home demolitions in the city of Chicago. When a 90-day demolition permit is made, we then learn as an office at the same time as the community. We start navigating with people in the community as well as Preservation Chicago. My office helped Preservation Chicago build the history behind the house, which is very important when they then go in front of landmarks to try to get this individually designated as a landmark, which is the way to save the house. It did not meet the criteria, but we provided information every step of the way.
Did you engage the community? Did you talk to the residents of this community? Did you talk to the residents of the 43rd Ward about 2240 North Berlin?
I talked to residents in the community about how we were building a case with Preservation Chicago, but it's not correct that we could have stopped this from the Aldermanic office.
Not one resident.
Mr. Comer, I'm the moderator.
Sorry
Thank you.
about that.
Do you support, both of you, do you support the long promised review of all historic buildings? Mr. Knudsen.
I think we should do a review. I mean, this ward is blessed with the most historic preservation districts in any ward in the city of Chicago. A lot of work goes into that.
So are you going to be on record of saying you do support that?
Just the overall review
Yes,
of the
long
districts
promised
in the,
review. Yes.
absolutely.
And Mr. Comer.
Absolutely. I'm the 4-time elected president of the Sheffield Neighborhood Association. We have historic districts in my domain. It's preservation's huge. The building, my family home is over 113 years old. I love it.
Thank you. The Royal George development will add housing capacity, but the proposal also sets a precedent that some worry might diminish the area's historic character. It has hit a snag recently. It's not a done deal just yet. And while it's not in the ward, it is perhaps something that might affect all of you. And what do you think? Do you support the Royal George development? Mr. Comer.
Yeah, last week when I was at the meeting, I shared with the audience that was there and the owner and developer, as well as the second ward alderman, that this development does not have the support of the community surrounding it. When I'm alderman, the direct neighbors will always have the loudest voice in the conversation when it comes to variances and real estate. So I asked Draper Kramer to say, listen, please listen to what the comments were made tonight. Go back and bring back something that the community can support. Because if I'm in that position and I'm overseeing that, the conversation doesn't take place. They don't get that building built the way they presented it.
Royal George, where do you stand?
Yeah, so this development, we have talked quite a bit with the neighborhood organizations surrounding this development, and there is a lot of concern. There was good questions at the meeting, and at the meeting, the second ward alderman, Brian Hopkins, at the end said he's going to be taking it under review. Him and I have a good stream of communication, so we're going to keep talking with him about this, what this would mean with our ward and what our ward residents are asking for here. I think there's an understanding in the community that this site is fit for something, but the question that was resounding is why not build by right? Why not build what you can build under law? Because in this spot, you can build quite a bit.
There are other projects like Lincoln Yards, the new casino on Halsted, also not directly in your ward, but certainly will have an impact. And it brings concerns about infrastructure that might impact the 43rd Ward. So what is your vision, Mr. Knudsen, first, for upgrades, as Armitage is already jammed and it will be a main artery for both cars and bikes?
Yeah, it's going to be tricky. We're going to have constant communication. Any development that goes up near the ward, it's not truly done until it's done. So we need to negotiate along the way. An example of an issue that I've been talking about is our firehouse. on Larrabee and Armitage currently would be the firehouse that's pulling the Lincoln Yards. That concerns me. We have a board of traffic. The thought of our fire trucks being pulled west and not being able to serve the lakefront then, should there be a few incidents at once, is a concern. So I'm talking to the firefighters, and it's an ongoing conversation that will continue.
Mr. Comer.
Well, I think everyone in this community and everyone in this room right now thinks that that casino is a bad idea and where Lori Lightfoot placed it. But, you know, even without those, our streets are overcrowded. We need infrastructure improvements. We need to look at all forms of transportation and both pedestrian traffic. It's something that this ward has needed for decades and it hasn't been addressed. And as Alderman, I would say that the fire department, this conversation about Lincoln Yards has been going on for years. And the developer has already admitted that once their community is up or as it's being built, that other assets like fire departments, like police departments will be built over there.
Well, we're not done with development, but let's pivot for a moment. Let's talk about affordable housing. You both have mentioned it already. There is a lack of options for those who would like to live in the 43rd Ward. It is estimated that each year 2,000 to 3,000 residential units are demolished in exchange for larger single-family homes. What are your plans to create options in what is viewed as the most expensive, wealthiest ward in the city? Mr. Comer.
Sure. So when I was elected president of the Sheffield Neighborhood Association in February of 2020, I spoke with all three alderpersons that are within our purview, 32, 2, and 43. And I said, if you're going to develop, or there is going to be a development, a multi-unit development of 10 or more units, we are not going to sign off as a neighborhood association on having that developer pay into the ARO. And what that does, if somebody pays into that, they can pay into the fund instead of building affordable housing on site, which the city requires. And we said, we're just not going to do that because we believe, financial diversity actually adds to the tapestry of our community. And unfortunately, that is lacking right now. So I've had a great relationship in working with the second ward alderman, and we've not approved a single multi-unit building that the developer has wanted to pay into the ARO, which we look as a win.
Mr. Knudsen.
I agree with my opponent on pushing for the 20% on-site affordability. This is something that historically has not occurred in our ward. Our ward, often people were paying in the funds for the affordable off-site. And 20% affordable on-site in a community like Lincoln Park, it means more balanced affordability throughout the city, and it's really important. I also think, zoning and development is not a one-size-fits-all approach. I know I mentioned that I live in a historic preservation district that wouldn't have room for developments, or it's nothing we would ever consider. However, we have corridors like Clark, just south of Diversity, that are ripe for some healthy units that will add foot traffic, that will include our affordability requirements, and will make that corridor safer. That business corridor has been shut down a little bit by the lack of foot traffic, and I think it's a prime spot.
All right, let's talk about your resumes, both of you. Mr. Knudsen, you have said that you work remotely out of various coffee shops. You've had a lot of different jobs since 2015. Which particular job demonstrates your leadership experience?
I love that you think 2 law firms is a lot of jobs. I feel like I don't feel the same way. So I was first an attorney in a big law firm called Catton, Much and Rosenman. And at Catton, my deal flow was mostly mid-market private equity deals. I started getting more of a practice as it relates to startup founders and investors. So I went over to a boutique law firm that was only 3 months old. It was a bit of a risk at the time. I was the first hire out of big law, but the thought was we could cut our rates in half to give better business. I became an external general counsel to a lot of investors and startup companies, and I'm finding parallels in this job as alderman in many different ways. I never knew what my clients would call me for. We never know what's going to be on our desk in the Aldermanic office. At the same time, I was doing a lot in the civic community. I chaired the city zoning board of appeals for a couple years. I ran the ward's 43rd Ward Judicial Review Panel. This private sector leadership combined with the public sector leadership is something I'm using every day in this job.
You have many wealthy donors who have business with the city. What do they expect from you in return for those donations?
I have a broad coalition of support, and I stand very strongly on my ethics, like many candidates that take money, that no donation means anything going into a term.
Mr. Comer, can you fill us in on your work history? Why is there no public website for your consulting? And how are you prepared to represent the board?
Sure. Well, I was an independent consultant, so there's hundreds, if not thousands, of independent consultants that don't have websites. But to answer your question, which of my jobs has defined me? I think it was when I was a utility scale renewable energy developer. I was a city kid going into rural communities and offering agricultural families financial security over 50 years. So it was an extraordinary experience, and dealing with a diverse group, and certainly a group that I was raised here right in the 43rd ward, so I wasn't raised in the country, but it was a great learning experience for me. And going into a high school gymnasium with 600 people and talking about adding to their community, but also being a long-term partner and addressing the NIMBYism that happens. I think that really equips me perfectly to represent this ward and city council. I've negotiated tough deals. It was an extraordinary experience, and I just want to bring that to our ward and to the city.
Your resume does note that you are also the beat facilitator for CPD, but who is your most recent client?
Well, with all of my clients, I signed non-disclosure agreements, so I don't think it's appropriate that I.
Well, wouldn't it be fair for the folks that would elect you to be their representative to know who you are getting paid by?
Certainly. And are we asking my opponent who all of his clients were?
Most recent, for sure.
Sure. He's already said who he works for and where he has worked. I mean,
I'll go into client.
I mean, I don't feel comfortable actually breaking a non-disclosure agreement.
I can go into mine if you want.
sure.
Yeah, so my most recent client who's helped a lot with my campaign is a 43rd Ward resident who co-founded the company RX Bar. I helped him run his creative venture council fund. He's a DePaul success story. And I'm really, proud to have that friendship and advice going forward.
All right.
But if, Marianne,
Yes.
if we are hinting towards, financial contributions, none of my former clients are contributors.
Well, we wouldn't know that if you don't tell us who your clients
True.
are.
That's
Okay. All right. These are some shorter answers. Zoning changes, landmarking, pot dispensaries, and liquor stores. How will residents play a role in making those decisions? Mr. Comer.
residents are always going to be.
1 minute.
Oh, residents are always going to be at the heart of every decision. When you talk about zoning, a cannabis dispensary across the street from the park, I don't even know why we're going through this special permit approach. It's already been made very clear to the entire community through a very short process that the neighbors don't want it. I just find it unconscionable that my opponent does not engage and listen to the community. That is the job of aldermen. And there's so many examples of that. The dispensary is just one of them.
Mr. Knudsen.
So I hosted 2 community meetings in the first several weeks of being in office. Both had very large attendance. And what I want to note to the one that my opponent mentioned is this cannabis dispensary, it has a long way to go. We have not approved a thing. It's not even on the docket yet, which will be months. And we will be having another community meeting to discuss this. We received mixed opinions on this. I truly feel the concerns around it being near a park. So it's going to be really eye-opening to lean on the community in this next step, which is the real substantive step, it's the permitting step, to see where this goes.
And community groups obviously want to know when it comes to these decisions, zoning, landmarking, pot dispensaries, liquor stores, will you commit to notifying the community and sharing the timely information? Mr. Knudsen.
Yes, I commit to that.
Mr. Comer.
Absolutely. I mean, the job of alderman is serving the community. I mean, we're really running to have 52,000 bosses. You have to include them in everything that you do.
All right. Development keeps coming back into the picture. Many are concerned about, and you mentioned it as well, long empty storefronts. What is the plan to entice businesses to the neighborhood? And how can you make it easier for entrepreneurs to open a business, Mr. Comer?
Sure. And it's one of the reasons why the Chicago Tribune endorsed me as the best candidate for this position is my plan to help small businesses. The city of Chicago needs to do so much more to make sure these, dreamers, which small businesses are, not just survive but thrive. I don't understand why, when small businesses fail, they fail within the first 3 years, but yet before they can even turn on their lights and open a door and sell a widget, they have to pay these permit and licensing fees and wait months to do that. We need to bring back the Business Express that used to exist, where they come in, one-stop shop, the city gets put on a stopwatch to do anything that they need to do, and then we need to put them on a reduced fee schedule. Then by year 5, so years 1 through 5, they're reduced fees. Year 5, you are now a thriving business. That business is going to create real tax revenue for the community. And empty storefronts don't call the police. Built storefronts do.
Mr. Knudsen?
Yeah, the storefront issue in our ward is when I truly put my startup lawyer hat back on. And we've been getting to work quickly on this issues where we've sat down with landlords and companies thinking about coming in, talking about rents are high in this ward. This isn't a ward that people don't want to have their businesses in, they do. And we've seen some success pretty quickly. We can't announce the name yet, but we're filling John Barleycorn. That's been empty for quite some time. It's a hand by hand, work the phones process to get our storefronts filled. Also, partnering with the Chamber of Commerce is so key here. I have a great partner with the Chamber of Commerce. I've served on the board of a Chamber of Commerce. I'm supported by the city's Chamber of Commerce. And these are such valuable resources when we go to the local issue of filling our storefronts. I'm advocating for more grant money for our chamber. I've advocated for storefront facade grant money for our small businesses. And I know a lot of you have seen the small business facade igniting where the Art Institute projects art onto the walls. It's a great way to light up businesses while they're vacant and make people feel safer.
What about specifically the corner of Lincoln and Armitage? And we've seen perhaps 3 restaurant bars in recent years change hands there. It's been vacant for over 4 years. How will you revitalize that corner, Mr. Knudsen?
Yeah, we find that good business spurs good business. I'm biased about that corner because I also live right there, and the swaths of vacancies are quite big. It's the corners at Stanley, Sedgwick's, Gamekeepers. One of them we are very close to filling, which I'm very excited about. My thought is if we can fill one of them, the others come.
Can you give us a hint of what that might be? Is it a restaurant? Is it a bar? Is it a store? What will
it's a restaurant use. It's not a bar. It's more of a potential grocery use. We can't announce the name yet because I do really want this one to come across the finish line, but we've had discussions with our neighborhood association about it, and it's one that fits the community.
Mr. Comer?
Well, that intersection is close to my heart because I used to live at the corner of Armitage and Hudson in my younger years. And it was a vibrant cornerstone in our community. As the alderman, you are the lead advocate to fill storefronts. I hope my opponent, is actually doing that right now. We don't know because he's not telling us.
Yes.
So anyone who reads our newsletter probably remembers one a few weeks ago where we announced and celebrated a lot of the storefronts that are being filled. Some really good restaurants on Clark like Kala and Hot Pot. We're filling a lot really fast, and I definitely intend to support them very vocally through our newsletter as we have been.
All right, now we have some even shorter answers. Let's start with, we're going to call this the lightning round. All right, so let's start with who do you support for mayor? Mr. Knudsen.
So just like last round, I'm proud to be independent in this race. I am not making endorsements for mayor. I find it really important that as alderman, whoever the mayor is someone that I will work with and also someone that I will hold accountable. That's really important in bringing results back to this ward.
But again, don't you think that folks who are voting for you would like to know which way you lean? And it's some 40 aldermen have announced who they're, maybe not quite 40, but at least 30 have announced who they are supporting.
Yeah, when I sat down with former aldermen about their endorsements in me, it was staying independent was a big one. What I will say is we've got a really thorough crime plan on our website that talks about community policing. It talks about feed integrity.
So what does that have to do with who do you support for mayor?
I support the crime plan of Paul Vallis. I am not endorsing anyone for mayor. I am not making endorsements.
Mr. Comer.
Well, whoever wins, I'll be happy to work with them. But I've said this from the beginning, I'm supporting Paul Vallis.
You said this in the first round as well.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I was actually the first one to say that.
All right. And Mr. Comer, who do you see as an ally in the city council?
The other 49 alders. I mean, you have to work with them. You know, not one person can change the city by themselves. We are going to have a new mayor, so there's not going to be an entrenched power. What I'm excited about is that there's going to be a larger voice and power in the city council.
Thank you. Who do you see as an ally?
I actually really like his answer. I think it's true. It's all of them, but I will say some quick allies are, you know, Tom Tunney has been such a good mentor to me.
He's gone.
For quite
He's
some
not
time.
going to be there.
So Bennett Lawson has been his chief of staff for 16 years. Bennett is someone I am very close with. Scott Wagispack, just to our west. Scott Wagispack is someone who he's such a good thought partner on different things related that touch our ward. I'm really happy for these relationships.
All right. Who have you joined any caucuses in the council, or will you join any caucuses?
So by default, I am a part of the LGBTQ plus caucus. We have a wide mix of opinions on that caucus, so we do not meet regularly. I do not plan to join a caucus.
Mr. Comer.
I would certainly wait to get in, but I have no plans to join a caucus.
Mr. Comer, will you hold quarterly ward nights?
I would actually hold ward nights a heck of a lot more frequent than a quarter. I think you have to have a monthly. In fact, my plan is to actually take the ward office to the different corners of the community every month.
Mr. Knudsen.
Yes, we are looking into quarterly at least to get started. What we've been doing quite recently are menu walks around our wards communities to really look at infrastructure issues and also teach people how to use the 311 app, which sometimes streamlines the requests that we get from our office. It's a great way to engage people. Also, when we do food and goods drives from the ward, that's been experiences where I'm in there on the weekends, and it's a good way for people to come in and meet. I'd like to be doing as much as possible. I love being out and about in the community. So
will you hold those nights, those ward nights, with neighborhood organizations on a revolving basis?
Yeah, I think that's how we've been doing our menu walks. And I think that's a great idea to fine tune it by neighborhood organization. Yeah, I think it's smart because my thought is we have a very engaged community. So if we make it too busy all at once, we might not get as much done. So I like that idea, Marianne.
What about?
Well, please write that down because I'm a president of one of the neighborhood associations and I still haven't received a call from my opponent since he was put in this position by Lori Lightfoot. And I'm not the only neighborhood association president, but that's been the case. Again, we're going to take the ward office every month to the different corner of the ward. So we're going to be in all 8 corners if you want to define the ward by the 8 neighborhood associations.
Response.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something because it's been a hit that keeps coming to me. Both of us applied for the endorsement. In my endorsement application, I included the signature of 143rd Ward community leaders. Several rounds of interviews, they looked at our resumes next to each other and they chose mine.
Let's talk about that salt and pepper quickly.
Sure. Well, I'd have to say that the head of that selection committee, right after he was appointed, hosted a fundraiser for him.
The former Salt and Pepper Diner. Do you support a cannabis dispensary there, Mr. Comer?
Absolutely not. First of all, the Salt and Pepper, the Salt and Pepper Diner is a Comer family favorite, and actually it's 11 years ago this month that it closed, and we miss it dearly. But I think it's a terrible idea to have a cannabis dispensary across the street from the park. But I'm not anti-cannabis. What I want to do is work with that small business owner and put it in a part of the ward that welcomes it.
Thank you. Mr. Knudsen.
I believe in the community process. In the first round of this, our office wrote a letter of neutrality. We followed suit with the community organization on that way. We have a long way to go on this. I don't know what will happen with that, but what I will say is we need to fill that vacancy that's been vacant for around 8 years on the corner at Salt and Pepper. I also will say, no matter what, we've invested ward infrastructure dollars to the L stop on Lincoln near Wrightwood. It's a dark zone between businesses. It intimidates people from walking at night. We've invested with the chamber in uplighting, a mural, and there's going to be arches and benches. So
So that I'm taking this as a maybe. I asked, do you support it or not? You're saying we have a no and we have
I believe in the process. This process is a long way to go. We really need to see the process through, and the community will be there.
all right. Do you support privatization, school vouchers, or adding charter schools to CPS? Mr. Knudsen.
I think that's an interesting question in that we don't, in the 43rd Ward, we don't feed into charter schools. I do believe sometimes they do a really good job at educating kids, especially now that charter school employers are often unionized. It's a complex issue that, I'd be happy to have meetings on.
And school vouchers?
Yes, those as well. Yep.
Mr. Comer.
I agree with my opponent. Charter schools really they're not a big issue here in 43, but I always want to focus on our community schools. We have great elementary schools and we have a wonderful high school that we're sitting in here now. I'm a graduate of Oscar Mayer, one of those amazing schools, and we always want to make sure that those students have the funds and the assets to be everything they want to be.
There is a proposal to increase the real estate transfer tax to target homelessness. Do you support that, Mr. Comer?
Homelessness in this city is a real problem, and we need to figure out a way to address it. I don't believe that adding, another layer of taxation is the way to address that. But we need to do a better job. Homeless people should not be sleeping in the airports, and I think it was deplorable that the mayor waited for Instagram to tell her that. They should not be sleeping on the trains because it's not safe for them. It's not safe for the drivers. We need to develop more appropriate housing for them. But no, we're talking about the bring home tax. Yeah, no.
Mr. Knudsen.
Yeah, I'd like to be specific on that ordinance. So the funding source for that ordinance was going to be a tripling of the real estate transfer tax on homes over $1 million. That's a single revenue source, which in my eyes doesn't work because it also manipulates real estate prices right around $1 million. I've met with advocates on both sides of this issue, and I've been very straightforward that I cannot support that tripling of the real estate transfer tax. The Bring Chicago Home Ordinance has great policy goals. We need to find more diversified revenue sources to pay for it. What Bring Chicago Home would do is sustain the $164 million a year that the city has been budgeting towards a homelessness response for the past 4 years. We've been budgeting that amount much due to federal funds coming in. I think that $160 million is needed. Absolutely cannot be from an RETT increase.
All right. Next question, short answer if we can. Do you support increased funding for abortion services in Chicago? Mr. Knudsen.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. That was it. That one we finally do have a yes. I mean, a quick answer. All right. So next up, it is your turn to ask each other a question. I think you are prepared for that, I'm sure. Mr. Comer, what's your question to Mr. Knudsen?
Since you were appointed by Lori Lightfoot, what ordinances have you authored, not sponsored with dozens of others, but what ordinance have you authored in the last 6 months that have been passed?
Yeah, so well, first off, I'm quite proud of co-sponsoring as many as I have. I also co-sponsored an ordinance regarding the CTA requiring Dorval Carter to appear 4 times in front of council. That was very counter to what the 5th floor wanted. The administration was not a fan of this. What that resulted in, the ordinance did not pass, but Dorval Carter appeared in front of us for subject matter hearing and in person agreed to appear twice in front of council. That's great. We heavily fund CTA, but we never get to question them. We need oversight and accountability within CTA. So I'm proud of that one. A few ordinances I'm drafting right now because the reality of legislation is it takes time in getting people on board. I'm starting to draft an anti-idling ordinance, which is that cars that idle in our streets and on Clark, on Halstead for more than 3 minutes could be ticketed. This is important because it cuts down on emissions. Emissions coming from cars idling in Chicago are obscene. It also frees up traffic space. Our schools really struggle with drop in, drop off. It's a constant replanning. And I think this could also help with that a lot.
All right.
That actually didn't answer my question. I said, what ordinances have you authored that have been passed in the last 6 months?
So I think I talked right away about one that I co-wrote and had a great result. I also co-sponsored several. There's a reality here that
Again,
helped
you
the
keep saying
ordinances take time.
co-sponsored. I'm asking which ones were you the author
Yeah, so
of?
Brian,
You had two.
Brian,
you had two.
leading is
You had-
about leading is about collaboration. In the city, we collaborate on these items.
Can you just answer the question? How many did you draft? Were you the main author of?
I just explained
No,
it.
you did two, and they were both for handicap parking spots.
Wait, explain that. What?
All you have to do is go to the city clerk's website. The only two ordinances that you were actually the main author of were to provide 2 handicap parking spaces in the 43rd Ward. Now, last week you did actually present one, for a 4-way stop at Armitage and Cleveland, which I applaud you for because we've been trying to get that. And as the president of Sheffield Neighbors, we've been supporting LCA on that. But come on, I asked you a very simple question and you we're doing this.
Yeah, but I
instead of
think
answering this.
you're looking for a gotcha that doesn't
No, I'm not.
exist.
I'm asking for a very simple answer.
Being on city
I was the
council
main
is
author
about
for X, Y, and Z.
collaborating. So you co-sponsor, you write things together, you negotiate things together. I'm really proud of my quick record, and I'm excited to push forward with the anti-crime precedent that we've been creating together. We all work better
So
when we
I
do
think
it
everybody
together.
can
I
see
think
he's
let's
not
move
answering
on
the
to
question.
now your turn, Mr. Knudsen, to ask a question to Mr. Comer.
Sure. So like I said, we
Oh,
have.
can I just stop? I thought we weren't supposed to have notes.
I did not hear, I was not told. I've always allowed notes. We just had a mayor's debate. They were. allowed
43rd Ward
notes.
Alliance, did we not just sign a document saying we weren't supposed to have notes?
No one told me that.
I didn't sign. Sorry. I mean, here, take my scribbles and notes. It's
Well,
there's nothing genius here. So I'll ask my question if that's okay. So we again have a very substantive crime plan on our website. We've reviewed yours and we're trying to put some of the facts together. One thing that you've rested heavily on throughout this campaign process is that 42% of the CPD budget is coming from police settlements and top brass salaries. 5% of the police budget is for settlements, $85 million, and 1% is for salaries of lieutenants and above. That's 6 for us. We're really just struggling to find where you get your numbers on the budget that I helped pass.
So what's your question?
So the question is, what's the difference between the 6% that is reality and the 42% that is on your website and that you've been talking about quite frequently?
Well, listen, I stand by what I said. I mean, obviously we agreed not to bring notes up here, so we can't have a show and tell on where we came up with the numbers. But I'm comfortable with my statement.
Okay, I'm just saying that's quite a difference in reality, and I would love if everyone, reviewed our public safety platforms on our website, and then just reviewed sourcing and the amount of detail that we each put into them.
I did miss what the question was to him.
Okay, yeah. How did you get the number where you're saying that 46% of the CPE budget is from top brass salaries and police settlements?
Yeah, I said 42, not 46.
Still a difference of 36%.
Correct. But if you're asking me a question, why don't you quote me correctly? We reviewed it a while ago. We just didn't do it as a reactionary, measure. So again, I feel comfortable with what I've stated in the past.
All right, we have some more specific questions to each of you. Mr. Knudsen, while they now endorse you, former Alderman Michelle Smith and Marty Alderman had raised concerns that, quote, you strongly aligned with the development community, and, quote, the Illinois Realtors Fund is now openly paying for a major part of your campaign. Why is the Illinois Realtors Fund spending so much to elect you? And is that a sign that you will favor their concerns?
I think the first part is the endorsements from Alderman Smith and Overman. We had a lot of great talks about how we're going to work together for this ward. On the piece with the realtors, we all fill out questionnaires for endorsements. I have a plan to keep real estate values high in this ward. It's bettering this ward in so many different ways. And quite frankly, I've voted both for and against their interests already. In no way did we think we got this.
How did you
So I voted for their interests in supporting a budget that had no property tax increase. And I supported against their lobbying and supporting to sustain the 5% CPI guardrail.
All right, Mr. Comer. At one of Alderman Michelle Smith's last Lincoln Park Alliance meeting, she proposed approving a school expansion that would include demolishing several orange-rated buildings. Do you support that proposal?
So that's a part of DePaul University and a planned development. DePaul owns those. We are, because the former alderwoman retired, those conversations have halted. What I want to do and what I will do as president of the Sheffield Neighborhood Association and as alderman is make sure that the community is heard. You have to engage the neighbors around that piece of property or those several pieces of property, and you have to hear what they have to say. That will guide my decision because the neighbors will always be heard when I'm in office.
And so is that the only criteria? What is your criteria for what you will use for when to support or not to support the expansion?
Sure. So, as alderman, you are charged with making that decision. But, so far to this point, all we have seen is a drawing, and the community process hasn't even started yet. It should have been much further along now than it is, but that stopped because the alderwoman retired.
Mr. Knudsen, back to you. You said you took a leave of absence from your corporate law firm where you worked on venture capital and cryptocurrency issues. Will you be resigning from that firm? And what about taking any new clients?
Oh, so, and just to set the record straight there, I resigned immediately, effective my appointment. We quickly transitioned clients away, and I have no connection with the law firm anyway. What I took a leave of absence from was the day I applied for the appointment. I took a leave of absence from the Zoning Board of Appeals in order to, avoid any conflicts. Can you repeat the second part?
What about taking any new clients? As an attorney, obviously.
Yeah, I've been pretty clear with the ward. This is a full-time job. It requires a full-time job. I sacrificed a career that, quite frankly, I felt like I was peaking at, but it was really important to me because I'm excited to be serving.
And Mr. Comer, as a consultant, would you commit to doing no paid consulting?
Absolutely. I stopped that the moment I applied for the appointment process. This is a full-time job. I'm not an attorney by education, so I could never actually, do a property tax appeal or have any sort of side business like that. But no, this is a full-time job. This requires the alderman to be always focused on the 43rd Ward and not some other business.
All right, let's talk about education. Lincoln Park High School, thank you for hosting us, but you can see that perhaps there could be some improvements. How would you fund it, Mr. Comer?
Well, we have to tell the story of this school. This is our only high school in the 43rd Ward, and it covers such a wide swath where, our elementary schools are more localized, and those parent organizations can actually fundraise to help the funding gap. Lincoln Park High School has a more difficult time. So as alderman, I want to tell the story. I want to open up the doors. We have 1,300 kids playing Oz Park softball and baseball 100 feet away. Open up the gymnasium that works, not the one that's in disrepair, and invite them in, and also have ward nights. Invite the community and tell the story. We have captains of industry living here. I want to bring them in and say, hey, you got to help us.
How would you fund the improvements?
Well, public-private partnership. We have some of the wealthiest people in the city living here, and we want to make sure that Lincoln Park High School is the #1 choice for residents in this community. I don't want them to worry about whether they're going to get into Peyton or any other selective enrollment. I want them to say, as 7th and 8th graders, I want to go to Lincoln Park High School. I want to be a Lion.
Mr. Knudsen.
Yeah, so agreed. I'm spending a lot of time in the high school right now talking about a potential project. I'm someone I've only ever gone to public school, kindergarten, all the way to University of Illinois for law school. We're looking at phases. There's an organization, everyone Google it, it's fabulous, called Stage Right CPS, that's looking at this auditorium as the first phase. There's already renderings, and the fundraise on that is not as massive as what I believe is the bigger plan. One school, one community. How can we really envision this high school for the long run? That I also agree will need to be done through public and private partnership. I think I'm a uniquely fit person to kick that off. I've done a lot of fundraising venture in my career as a venture capital lawyer. It requires a pitch, and the pitch to the community that this high school needs to be the premier option is also one that no matter where you send your kids to school, a strong public high school in the exact geographic center of the ward will raise our property values. It will also steady the ward from the center, give kids a space where they can truly enjoy. Get rid of a gym that right now is often unusable. We've got to rethink the school, and there's a lot of really passionate people even in this room about it that I'm glad to be working with.
Let's talk about school size. Lincoln Elementary and Oscar Mayer were deemed overcrowded or near capacity, but other schools in other neighborhoods, they do have plenty of room. What do you see as your role as the city looks to perhaps redistribute students? Mr. Knudsen.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And a lot of our neighborhood schools took hits during the pandemic, and that really affects funding. I'm really looking forward to partnering with the Schools Alliance in the ward. We've been talking about a bunch of ideas on how we can better promote our schools, a separate educational newsletter with the ward office's educational list that pitches to 25,000 people. Just the beauty of our schools. I want to tell the story of what's going on here. We recently did it with the opening of the new Lincoln Park Early Learning Center on Clark. It's a phenomenal universal pre-K center. It's one of the most beautiful spaces I've ever seen. It overlooks the park. There's big windows. It's bright. We need to tell that story, and that grabs attention to our ward. That also makes our ward a more desirable place to stretch. Living in this community is a stretch for some people. If you're stretching the pocketbook to buy a home, you want to know that you have the premier public school options. So it's all part of that conversation.
Mr. Comer.
Again, as alderman, you are the lead advocate for the ward. It's all about balancing and rebalancing, and we want to make sure we have amazing public schools here. I'm a product of Oscar Mayer, and I'm so proud to be a Bulldog. And when there isn't room at Lincoln or another one, and there's space at another one, let's just redraw some of the boundaries and move them to another wonderful school.
Well, but redrawing the boundaries, that isn't just going to be your decision.
Correct. I mean, everything we do, citywide takes partnerships, and that's what I've built in Sheffield, and that's what I want to build, moving forward. In fact, what I find interesting is that in the first round of this election, in the municipal, of the 6 candidates, I'm the only candidate that actually won a precinct by 50%, and that 50% is the Sheffield Neighborhood Association. And that's because
that doesn't have anything to do with
I understand that, but it talks about how committed I am to the community. I want to take that to the ward. So it doesn't matter like how we get it done. It's just that you have to be the lead advocate, engage the community, and get it done.
Let's come back to infrastructure, since it is such an important topic here. What is your vision for the best way to mix the bikes, the cars, and the public transit that is just all together in this ward? And where do you stand on the Dickens Greenway?
Sure.
Mr. Combs.
Yeah, and this is something that the city hasn't addressed for years. When the former alderwoman presented the Greenway plan, I said that there are certain aspects of this plan that everybody can get behind. If you want to raise the intersection at Dickens and Fremont so the St. James kids can be more visible, perfect. Everyone's down for that. If you want to lower the speed limit, perfect. If you want to put in counterflow stop signs, perfect. However, having that greenway 100 feet or 100 yards from this auditorium pass by the base of a hill that kids sled on, that I sledded on, 40 years ago, and thousands of high school kids walk across, is not safe for the bikers and it's not safe for the pedestrians. We need to actually look at that plan to make sure that it's safe for everyone, including the bikers. Now, when we talk about infrastructure as a whole, we really need to be thoughtful. And this is going to take a citywide effort because, to your point earlier, Armitage is crowded. Fullerton is depending upon what time of day, you really almost need something like a green wave, which we've been discussing with some traffic study companies about.
But not the Dickens Greenway.
Not the Dickens Greenway, a green wave and that deals with lights all turning green at the same time.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Excuse me. All right. What about that? Where do you stand on the Dickens Greenway?
Yeah.
And what about your vision for bikes, cars, and transit?
Yeah, because we truly have it all in the 43rd Ward. So there's a lot of concern around the Dickens Greenway. It's something that it's a conversation that's been hotly debated since I think 2011 under the Emanuel administration, and then was approved 2 years ago after a lot of community involvement. I really hear concerns. So we've been trying to look at our ward infrastructure budget. We've allocated a specific amount of money to the way that the bikes shoot out onto Stockton. I was told that this would have been built a year ago if it wasn't for the cement strikes. And I think we need to be watching this like a hawk just to make sure that it is done safely, that we're investing in the right ways to make it safe going forward. And so, we're going to be watching that and we're talking to the community about it.
All right. So could you give me maybe your top 3 infrastructure priorities for the ward?
Sure. I'm a CTA user. I'm really lucky. I live between the 37 and the 156 bus. My vision for the CTA truly is citywide. It's what connects us. It's why a lot of people move here. So I also view it as ward specific. We've got to get the CTA back on track. One of the ways I did that was to promote or was to, co-sponsor the ordinance, getting Jorville Carter in front of us. We need to get rid of the ghost buses. We need more of a safety presence. The CTA has a lot of work to get done. Also talking to a lot of community members just about our parks. We have a really great ward for walking. We have several CHA homes that are adjacent to really good walking spaces. We're looking into investments in lighting to make it feel safer, some reevaluation in paths that many of which have been in place for over 50 years that don't necessarily make sense with how the parks are used and how these parks work with the rest of the ward.
Mr. Comer, your infrastructure priorities.
Sure. I've been a CTA rider my entire life because I grew up here in the city. So the Fullerton and Armitage stops, they're like home, because that's how I've accessed the rest of our wonderful city. We need to restore the sense of trust that riders need to have so they can repopulate both the buses and the trains. And that goes with putting more police officers there. So we need to actually fund the CTA in a better manner so that riders can come back. But, I really want to get back to the Greenway because, my opponent earlier tonight said it's not done until it's done. But, neighbors have reached out to him and they've wanted to engage about the Greenway and he's not responding to them. He said it's a done deal. So there's nothing to talk about. And I've heard from many people all across the ward that that's the case. And it's not the case. In fact, through FOIA requests, we've learned that the state of Illinois has told the Chicago Department of Transportation that they have to respond to requests from private citizens that they have refused to respond to over years. So one of the first things I'm going to do when I'm in office is we're going to get down to the bottom of this because I haven't seen one shovel go into the ground. So it's not done until it's done.
Response?
Yeah, so what I would say is when it was approved 2 years ago, that starts the process of federal funding. That brings things out of the ward aldermanic influence. So CDOT's discussions with IDOT are not at all with us. So our discussions right now with CDOT, who have told us it would have happened a year ago if it wasn't for the cement shortages, are me pushing to try to make this safer.
CTA was my last question. You both have sort of answered it, but I'm going to massage it just a bit. Would you recommend a friend of yours comes into town? Would you tell your friend to hop on the blue line and come on into the city? Mr. Knudsen.
Yeah, it depends during the day, yes. During night, I'm not comfortable with it right now.
And what can you do to improve that? You're the alderman and you can't even tell your friend to ride public transit into the city.
Yeah, there's a big safety push for putting more officers on the CTA that I truly believe in. I think that's one thing. I'm not one who thinks we stop investing when something's hurting. We need to keep investing in the CTA. I think right now there's a true shortage in staff of CTA workers. These were frontline employees during the pandemic who had it really hard. Getting them on board takes time. You need a good 6 months of training to get on staff to work as a CTA staff member. So I'm trying to also push the incentivizations for bringing more CTA staff on because that's how we make this safe and reliable again.
Do you agree with Mr. Vallis of taking the 100 million that is given to privatizing the security and instead have Chicago cops?
I do. And part of this goes to the lack of oversight that we've seen for a few years with the CTA. I do think it would be important and a good step.
Mr. Comer, what about you? Would you tell a friend, hop on the blue line?
Not at night. Absolutely not. It's interesting in campaigns, you always don't have to disagree with your opponent. And this is a situation that my opponent and I agree on. And I would absolutely take the money and put it into the CPD to manage and protect our public transportation system. If you'd asked me that question 6 years ago, I would have said absolutely, because I've taken that train in from O'Hare, to come in because traffic has just been, too much on the Kennedy coming in. And unfortunately, we're not there. And we really need to heavily invest in our police department to get more officers on the platforms, in the buses, and on the trains.
All right, believe it or not, we may finish just a tad early. Oh boy. Why don't we go to our closing statements? You each have 1 minute. Mr. Comer, you're up first.
Well, first, I want to thank Mary Ann for moderating tonight, Dr. Steinmiller for having us here, and also everyone in the audience, especially my parents who raised me in this community. Thank you so much for instilling in me a commitment to public service. I believe there are clear differences between my opponent and I. And you as an audience need to ask the question, do you want an alderman that looks at this job as a stepping stone to something else? Do you want an alderman that is not engaging the community, listening, not collaborating with the residents of this community, is funded and is supported by the political machine that is trying to take your vote and was appointed by a lame duck mayor 6 months ago who probably wouldn't be in this runoff if he hadn't been? Or do you want a candidate who's been in this community for over 4 decades, has been rolling up his sleeves as an elected community leader and loves this community and has shown it every single day of his life? Someone that thinks this is the greatest job in the world? If that's the candidate you want, I'm your guy.
Thank you, Mr. Comer. Mr. Knudsen, your closing statement.
Yeah, and again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Mary Ann, for hosting this. What I would say is I'm a pragmatic, a collaborative, and a steady leader. And I want to address one thing. I want to address the Tribune endorsement. Quite frankly, I would have loved to have received it. One thing, though, I feel strongly about is sometimes the best endorsements are those people who know you the most. Rebecca Janowitz and Wendy Taylor Nations, 2 leaders that I campaigned side by side from for months, have chosen to support me because of my steady leadership and the way I treat other people. 5 former aldermen, Michelle Smith, Marty Oberman, Bill Singer, Edwin Eisendrath, and Chuck Bernardini, all our ward's leaders who have known my opponent for decades. They chose to support me. It's not enough to live in a place. I moved here after law school. I bought property in the ward. I paid property taxes in the ward just like you. It takes a lot more to earn your vote. My focus here is public safety and fiscal stability. I hope everyone checks out our websites after this to look to the more thorough plans. And I'm so excited to be in front of you asking for your vote on April 4th.
Thank you both. I think it was a very entertaining discussion. You got a chance to hear them? Yes. Thank you very much. You want to come up and yay, call the organize. Early voting open today. Get moving. Thank you.
Sorry, again, thank you all for coming. And one final round of applause for Miss Mary Ann Ahern. All right. Thank you all. Thank you both. So have a good night. Oh, this is recorded and the neighborhood associations will be sending out Zoom links if you want to take a look at it again.